Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Matt Johnson. We are back with another episode of Level Up, where you learn to go from agent to entrepreneur. We've got an amazing guest here with us today. We're talking to George Morris, and we're going to get into a lot of what he's done, building essentially a team of over 1,100 across multiple states. And we got an amazing conversation to get to. So first of all, let's bring in my co-host, Greg Harrelson. Greg, what is up today?
Well, man, I am just so excited. I've gotten to know George over the last couple of years, and I'm just so excited to bring this type of conversation to the listeners out there. And I know there's a lot of Century 21 members that are going to be listening to this podcast today. And I tell you what's up today. George is up today. That's what it is.
Well, let me give, for everybody that doesn't know, if you've been hiding under a rock and don't know who George is, let me throw out a couple of things so he doesn't have to toot his own horn too much. Founder and CEO of Century 21 Everest Realty Group, based in Salt Lake. So Everest Realty Group is the #1 Century 21 office in the world for units sold and commissions the last 2 years, #1 in the US for the last 3 years. And then in the Utah market, that office ranks #1 for units sold and total sales volume across all brands and independent offices for the last 3 years. You've also branched off into California with Troop Real Estate, bringing that into Century 21. That has 12 office locations and 550 agents. So combined, your team is over 1,100. So the first question is, how in the world did that happen?
I ask myself that same question. You know what? I'll tell you, every single thing that I think we've achieved has been by design. And I think having a clear vision of the future, exactly what you expect it to be. And so often, as you go through situations like this and you think, well, wait, was it just dumb luck? Of course, there was probably some dumb luck that occurred, maybe even a little divine intervention here or there at times. But the reality is that it was a key focus point of saying, okay, what are we going to become? Who are we going to become? And knowing that outcome. And starting at the very beginning of this with the end in mind.
Well, let's go back to that, because you made a reference before we started recording that you essentially started, however many years ago, with 5 people sitting around a conference table. So who were those people and what was the vision?
Yeah, so there was 4 or 5 of us who sat around a conference room table, and here's what it was. I got to a point where I don't think I necessarily had a choice. I had loved the opportunities that being a broker, an owner, the opportunities of getting involved deeply in the lives of other human beings, being able to truly make a deep, profound, long-term difference in people's lives. I'll tell you, today someone told me, they said, you're really not driven by all the money, are you? And I said, well, it's a nice byproduct, but the reality is what's more fun is the difference and the things that happen in the lives of the people that we lead. So with that, there was 4 or 5 people who sat around a little conference room table. And I said, hey, as the market was crashing and burning back in 2009, I said, what do you think about creating a real estate company? And true to his word, this is as true, John Syatt, one of my partners, said, well, you know what? If anybody else was to ask me that, I would tell you I think you're completely crazy. But the reality is that was the seedlings of what we've created as Everest. Became a little bit of an independent at the time. Converted, if you would say, a couple of years later to Century 21. And then here we are with just nearly 1,100 agents, but operations in both Utah and California. And it's been quite a journey and a real exciting one.
That is awesome. So George, let me just, or Matt, let me just jump in here. So, I've been around Century 21 since 1999, and I think, George, you started maybe 7 years ago within the Century 21 system. Is that correct?
No, 7 years ago, or 7.5 years ago now, just as an independent, and then exactly 20 months later. So basically, we just hit our 5-year mark with Century 21.
Okay, got it. So when you started with Century 21, when you rolled over into the brand, about how many agents were on the team at that time?
102, to be exact.
102, and you're at 1,100, maybe a little bit more than 1,100 right now?
Just shy of 1,100. Okay,
so you grew 1,000 people in 5 years.
Essentially, every year we've had year-over-year 100% growth.
Okay.
Year-over-year.
So here's just maybe one of the first things that I want to dive into. Because, I get it. You could sit with your some good minds, sit at the table. There's a lot of real estate agents and a lot of brokers and owners right now that are probably sitting at some coffee table or some dinner table with their friends or maybe their business associates, and they're visioning and creating these big plans. But at the end of the day, you can have the vision, whatever vision you want. You can have whatever business plan, the best business plan in the world.
Right.
How in the world did you even have the courage to leave that table and take on something so big and execute so well? And I say that because there's a lot of listeners right now that in their heart, they want to, maybe they don't want to go from 100 to 1,000, but maybe they want to go from 50 deals to 100 deals, or they want to go from, 50 agents to 100 agents, or 10 agents to 50
Sure.
agents. I think it takes courage, but how in the world did you even get the courage and the guts to go for something so big?
Yeah. I had some pretty good success in regards to just simply selling real estate on a just a traditional level. And but I had this great love for the brokerage business and the difference that it made for individuals. And at that point, I think as the market was crashing and burning, I was watching this great need for one thing, and that was leadership. And shortly into the beginnings of creating Everest, I had an experience that really changed me forever. And why it changed me forever, I think, and it's worthy of sharing, is I had an individual come into my office for just a few minutes. It was a little mini coaching session. They sat down and they said, "Can I share a story with you?" And I said, "Sure, share the story." This is very early on. And they said, "Hey, I went on a listing appointment." I said, "That's great." And I go, "Did you get the listing?" And they said, "Yes." And right after they said that, they started to swell up with some tears in their eyes. And I said, "What's wrong?" And they said, "Well, when I was in getting the listing, of course, this is in 2009 when everything is going crazy, and not crazy in the bad way, right?" And I said, "What happened?" They said, "Well, when I was in getting the listing, my car got repossessed." And they were just beside themselves. And I thought right then and there, that defining moment for me was I knew that this industry, more than ever before, needed true leadership. And so at that moment, and what I prepared to from that point and moving forward, was to become the best leader I could by whatever I read, whoever I spent my time with, and making sure that I did things that in some words, self-educated. Most people ask me what college I went to, and I did. I'm a University of Utah fan, but I'm here to say, not even proudly. In fact, I wish I would have finished. I haven't finished. I would say I still haven't finished, but I never got my degree. And I was sitting in the back. I was sitting in a car, and I had two incredibly talented individuals in the car with me, and they said, "We don't get it." And I said, "You don't get what?" "We don't understand how you've created this without having a formal education." And then I said these words. I said, "The smartest thing I ever did was putting smarter people around me than me." And then a keen vision, my own personal leadership, and the right leaders around me really have created what we have today as Everest and True.
Yeah. So here's what I'm hearing. So I'm hearing you had a vision. I'm
Correct.
sure that vision ended up becoming a plan also, right? I'm sure there was a strategy there, right?
And evolved, right?
Yeah,
Changed.
right. Sure. It was always planning, not just, there was, as soon as you wrote the plan, it was probably already old, because you had a new thought and you had to go back and restructure, at least from a monthly or quarterly standpoint. But what I'm hearing here is that it sounds like you developed a passion to lead others. And I'm imagining that desire to lead others to, or develop others to a higher level, is probably where you tapped in to the courage and the confidence on the days that you maybe felt like, gosh, why am I doing this? Is
Absolutely.
that really, that's probably what you grabbed onto. So it's a vision, a plan, and a passion. And I don't want to get too deep into the emotional passion part of it, but you had a strong desire to succeed in this particular level, and I'm sure that's what put you in the direction.
Well, look, a lot of people will come and they, in fact, I had a good friend of me today. He said, "Do you remember where you were 7 years ago?" And I said, "Yes, I was broke and I had nothing."
Wow.
And I look at all, those who know me well know I had a tremendous amount of health issues that happened during the first 2 years of building this company, from heart surgeries to eye surgeries to blown out knees to literally almost choking to death, as crazy as that sounds. But in the process of all of that, a couple of things. One, it was so difficult and so challenging. I remember I used to say, "Hey, I can do anything for 90 days. And what I realized early on in building the company, like you talked about courage, is that I recognized that I had to do the right things every single day. I had to execute when execution had to be absolutely perfect at that time. And so one of the things I started doing is that I couldn't even have enough vision to see 90 days. I couldn't even see 30 days. It got so painful as I was building the company, painful from what I had to become, the activities that had to be done, the dynamics of the market, the challenges that were there, that I got to the point to where I could say this: I can do anything for one day. And this organization, Everest and Troop, is built on the premise that I can do anything for at least one day. And if I can put enough of those days together and put a great month, a great quarter, a great year, all of a sudden I look back and go, wow, look at what we have accomplished as an organization. And it has been a profound experience.
Wow, that is a gold nugget. You know what? Because I think I can do anything for one day, right? And then tomorrow morning when I wake up, it's a new day, right? All I have to do is repeat that mantra and just get into action. And so instead of thinking about, well, I've got to do this for 90 days, well, I wish I could do that with my weight. Like I say, instead of trying to figure out how to lose 30 pounds, if I could just say, well, I can lose 1 pound, and then tomorrow I just got to figure it out again, right?
All right, so George, go deeper into the leadership part of things, and what's the vision that you're taking people through, and how does that match up with your vision for what you want to build versus their vision for themselves, and how they fit into that bigger picture? Where are you leading people to?
Yeah, no, great question. So for me on a personal level, I look at leadership. I love the statement of a John Maxwell who says leadership is nothing more, nothing less than influence. Right. Our ability to influence another human being for good, for the better. So from a philosophical standpoint, and really from the essence of what our organization is about, it is about one thing. It is that the mission of our company is this: to assist every agent and individual to becoming their very best. So one of the things that I think that's important to recognize is that most people love to compare themselves against each other. In fact, I always say that, Matt and Greg, if you were walking down a trail in the mountains and a bear jumped out, all that would matter is that, Matt, you outrun Greg and you're going to be okay. I mean, you probably would, right? I mean, I know Greg well enough.
Probably
you probably outrun him anyway. But my point is that most of us are comparing ourselves constantly about what others are doing. But the real measuring stick, right, like a Zig Ziglar might say, that the only real comparison is what did you do in relationship to what you could have done. So for us in the organization, if our quest in leadership is to help every agent become their very best, for each of us, that will be uniquely different, or for each agent, that will be uniquely different. But in the thing that's interesting about the industry right now in leadership is this. You hear at least the buzzwords of coaching, training. Every agent will get the email that says, oh, we've got coaching, or we've got free training, we've got this. But it's really not that they have coaching. It's not necessarily that they have training. The essence is how they do that, right? It's really the platform that they've created and that they've built themselves on, so that when the coaching is done and when the training is done, it becomes invaluable because it takes the agent to the highest level or to the next level in their life. So one of the things I always echo to our team is that the only way our organization becomes invaluable is we help others get to the next level in their life. And when you meet someone, or someone comes into your life that takes you to the next level, they become invaluable and you will never leave them. And even if you leave, you realize the value once you leave. And it's just like, we have agents who leave, but the beauty of that is so many of them, when they leave, come right back because they see the value that is invaluable to their life.
Yeah, that's powerful. And you're touching on something, and you talk about valuable to their life. So, right. So surely business, number of transactions, making money, that's where a lot of people feel like their value is to help somebody make money. Their value is to help somebody reach a certain number of transactions. When you're sitting down with somebody, or maybe you have a company coach, that's sitting down with somebody, when they're looking at setting a plan or a business goal or a business plan with a real estate agent, what all does it encompass? I'm hearing that it probably encompasses more, or includes more than just money.
Oh, absolutely, right. So for me, if someone came in and said, I want to do 100 transactions a year, or I want to build this great team, or I want to keep my team small, but I want to be highly efficient, whatever the answer they give me, I always say I'm not as concerned about what you want as I am why you want it. And when you look at the power of coaching, when you truly know what someone wants, and then the emotional thread that threads through that as to why they want it, then all of a sudden you truly have some leverage to motivate, to inspire. And of course, what great leaders do is that they consistently remind people of why they're doing what they're doing, and recasting that vision out into their life so that they can continue to pursue that. So part of the mechanisms of our coaching is to making sure that that happens, making sure the mindset's right, their disciplines are right, their skill sets are right, making sure they have a plan, right? The consistent and consistently are looking at their goals and their dreams, and then of course creating the systemization around that. So for us, there's 6 solid fundamentals to every coaching session, and depending on which agent that is in and what their needs are, one agent might need help with their disciplines and prospecting. The other one may be, let's just say they're sideways and their mindset is way off the mark, or maybe there's a skill set that they're lacking as we go through their numbers and evaluate their process.
So walk us through like your coaching program. It sounds like you've got a coaching program, or at least a training program internally. Yeah. So can you describe that to us? I would imagine somebody that's growing. One of the things that I had said to you earlier before we got onto this this podcast was, you have to be doing something right internally on developing people, or else you wouldn't be able to scale as quickly as you had. So can you kind of give us a little inside look of what that looks like in your company?
So yes. So let me go back to 7 years ago. For the first, I would say 3 to 4 years, my whole objective, and I don't ever think, if this makes sense, that I'm like a master of this business, but I think I do better than some of the individuals if I look across the country in this business, not by comparison or ego, but I think I have at least a good message from that standpoint of what to say in regards to how to create that. The first 3 years, my whole world was about focusing on how I was doing it, and could I master the very skill sets of coaching, recruiting, business development, that entrepreneurial spirit that we talk about, and moving that vision forward. And so in the first 3.5, maybe 4 years, in that time frame, it was about making sure I knew what I was doing and how to do it. And then it moved to a different level where, all right, let's make sure that let me teach others to do the same. Let's get them up to that next level. Then the next step was interesting, is that once they were able to sustain it on their own, I was able to go work on other angles of the business. But as they sustained themselves and got good at what they do and mastered what they do, now we're in this mechanism of my key leaders are now training other leaders, and that the volume of growth and the success of an agent is happening faster and faster because of the duplication of that process. Most of my time today is spent on training other leaders to train other agents. Whereas 4 years ago, all of my time was spent on training one agent to do it well or to do great things.
Right. So you start off training agents to become, let's just call them a great agent or top producer, whatever that is.
Everyone and master that process yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you got train somebody that's an agent to become a much bigger producer, and then those bigger producers train them on how to be leaders, and then now you've got, if we just started with one, you end up with now 2 leaders, and then you can handle 3 or 4 more agents. Perfect. 2 leaders go and train those 4 leaders, and then the 4 agents, those 4 agents become now 6 leaders, and then you bring in more agents, and it just keeps evolving like this. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is the reason for year over year 100% growth, is because it is all about those fundamentals of leadership and making sure that you're able to duplicate that process over and over again. And this sounds maybe crazy, but I've told agents this for years. It's easier to do 100 transactions than it is to do 25 transactions. And in their mind, especially the agent who's doing 25 is like, wait, how can you say that? But to do 100, you have to create systemization. You have to bring leadership around you. You have to execute at a higher level. And in those disciplines, what's interesting is you get more freedom, and it actually becomes easier.
Yeah, I've heard that before, and I thought about it. And when you're doing 25 deals, I mean, it's like you're leveraging yourself. And then when you
Exactly.
start doing 100 deals, you're leveraging your systems, and you may be leveraging some talents of others also, whether it be
Which is
staff
all
or
great.
whatever. Yeah, so it goes from leveraged to leverage.
Yeah, I like that. That's great.
Big difference. It's
Yeah, I
the
love
big
that.
big difference there. George, a lot of people are that would listen to this are going to be a little bit kind of wowed by the numbers. So let's just go back and forget your numbers for a minute. Forget that you went from 100 to 1,000, and let's just say that you had a team. You're a real estate agent, a top producer, and you had a team of 5 people, and you're thinking, gosh, I'd like to kind of develop my team out to 10 people or 15 people. What have you learned through the process of building your company like this? That you could share with somebody that might be kind of having a vision of just doubling the size of their team, and maybe they're only at 5 people right now. What have you learned that you can share that would still apply to them?
Yeah. Well, it's an excellent question, and it actually brings me back to right in the infancy when we had just a few agents, and two things were happening. One, we needed to add agents to the company, but the second thing is that there was a certain agent count where things got very, very, very busy. And so I'm a pretty simple guy. I mean, I like to keep things very simple. And so what I did is I isolated down to one principle and I said it today to a group of agents. I said, this organization was built on one principle: set one appointment a day, no matter what's happening, no matter what's going on. And look, this applies to whether it's an agent who's selling real estate every single day, and whether it's their team, it doesn't matter, or whether, of course, it's a broker or a manager or a broker owner, is that it is unbelievable the accumulation effect that can occur if you simply set one appointment a day. And so that principle of those 4 or 5 people that were with me and my partners as we built this company, the only objective was set one appointment a day. Most people think, Greg, about our organization, they think, oh my goodness, well, you must have just done tons and tons of, mergers, acquisitions, and I'm here to tell you that I look at the Utah market. We have over 500 agents here. I think it's like 90 agents that were through a merger or an acquisition. Almost all of our agent count has been built organically, one by one, by the principle of simply doing one thing: set one appointment a day.
Yeah. So it's as simple as that, and it goes back to I can do anything for one day.
Yep.
Right. You seem to bring it back to it's just set one appointment a day, or you can do anything for one day.
Yeah.
And it seems like
I'm a simple dude, Greg.
Yeah, you're simple. I got a chance, man. I've got a chance. Then at some point I can, I'm going to be able to do it.
You're doing great yourself. I already know.
Yeah. Well, it kind of, one thing that fascinated me about meeting you is I've been in my own little world. I was a producer, an independent producer, and when I say independent, a top producer, I guess we'll call it, whatever that means. And I just remember when I decided I was no longer going to build my team under my Greg Harrelson umbrella, and
Right.
I was going to disband that, and then my company was just going to be my team. Right. And I was going to allow them to take their individual credit. But what was interesting, and I think what's is cool about you and I, is that from the sense of I don't think of my company as a company. I think of my company as a team. Most of my agents think of our company as a team, but each one of them are building something unique for themselves. Each one of them have a different goal. And I think a lot of people miss that. And I think, that is also one of the advantages that we may have that allows us to grow. I would imagine you don't have a lot of inner office conflict and probably competition. I mean, I'm sure people compete. Whatnot.
Right.
But what about inter-office conflict? I doubt it.
Right. It was the conversation, right, of competing versus creating. But I'm a huge advocate. Look, I'm hoping that there's a few people who are running teams or orchestrating their teams who are listening to this. My advice always to a team is this, and it's the great Ronald Reagan quote. I'm not saying it exact, but it's this in so many words. It's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. And that philosophy on whether it be our company or a small team or large team is, I'm a huge advocate of recognizing every single team member. I think that at times there can be challenges where the team lead takes all the credit, and yet I have found that when team leaders give the credit to each one of their team members, like individually, it is fascinating the length of time that they will stay with that team because of that. And it doesn't have to be that way, and it can be maneuvered differently. But boy, I think there's some real power in that.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I'm glad you added that to the conversation. Now on coaching again, I wanted to just kind of, one of the things that was really interesting that when we were at the it was in the Bahamas, we were at the leadership conference.
Right.
You shared with me about a podcast. I think it was you, or unless somebody else shared it with me, but I think you told me that you were doing this like cool little podcast, and you and maybe one or your partners, maybe I think John's contributing to that also.
Yeah, no, he does.
And
Yeah,
I started listening to it, and I tell you, I don't listen to every one of them, but I bet you I listen to at least 3 a week. But
well, you are kind. Thank you for putting up with me for that much.
Yeah. Well, it's not you, it's John. I like to hear John.
Good, perfect. You listen to John.
No, I'm just kidding. Both of you are fantastic. But what was how did that originate? How did that even come out? Because I really like how you're not really doing a podcast and trying to promote anything. You're literally coming. Here's what how I describe it. You two are coming from complete contribution and are just spending 3, 5, 6 minutes on the phone talking about some really cool things and delivering so much value to the agents. Was that just originally just for your company, or can you kind of tell me how this all came about?
One, thank you for your kind words. It's very kind of you to say. And then second, it started on just kind of I have to tell you, I started realizing that I was not being able to touch all the lives of the people in our company as we began to grow. And I said, there's got to be a better way to connect to these people that we care such a great deal for. And also that, the individual who may not be able to show up at the event or the training or can't even come in for coaching just because of circumstances, it allows us to have a touch every single day. So it started initially with just a once a week thing. Then it dawned on me as to how many people were listening to it. So we started doing a daily thing. And then, to where now I have to tell you, it's probably one of the single most important things we do as an organization, to where we're able to stay connected. And the stories that come back to me from agents and the impact that it's having have been probably from the heart, kind of a gut check, make you feel good kind of feeling, has been priceless. It has been absolutely awesome. And of course, we may say that it's not monetizing, like we go out and, what people do where they'll do the podcast and monetize it. But actually from monetizing from the standpoint, it's elevating the success ratios of our agents from the standpoint of just purely their success.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is a give, right? And then let the law of reciprocity take place. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, and I get that. Here's something I just wrote down on my notes, and I know I'm going to ponder over this for the next couple of days or the weekend. What I just figured out is you're a leader who really likes to connect to those that you lead. And I think there's a big difference in a lot of leaders. I think a lot of leaders, they want to be known as a leader. Like they want people to read about them. They want people to hear about them. They want to inspire them because they did something big. But what I'm hearing, and I think this is critical for your success, is that you want to be connected to these people. So I can imagine if I'm part of your organization, how that's going to make me feel. And quite frankly, if I have to get up on a bad day and go to work and do something, I'm more likely to do it for you than I am for most people, because you're willing to be there for me. So that absolutely. I just wanted to share that because I'm hearing that in this conversation. And I think it's important that, for those that are listening that want to step up their game and be better leaders and more motivating and inspiring leaders for their team or whoever, I think they can pull from that. So that's awesome.
Well, Greg, it's interesting you bring that up. So many people, because they'll see our numbers, they'll say, when we first started the business, people used to think, well, these guys will never make it in business. Now they complain about the fact that we do too much business. And, and but from that, people will almost demonize me as thinking that I'm so driven for the almighty dollar. But what creates the revenue is the connection and your care and your concern for another human being. The byproduct, the success from the standpoint of the agents, the revenue that they bring in is a byproduct because they feel valued. You know this. I mean,
Yeah.
Any agent who, when they sit out there in the marketplace and they're trying to get a certain commission, right? The commission is always going to be in direct proportion to the value that they bring to the marketplace or to that particular client. And so I have always said that if there's a high level of value based on who you are to that client, then you're going to get the commission that you desire. But the commissions and the value are always in proportion. That could not be any more true in regards to our organization, that the people are here. I mean, I'm not here to say that our organization is by far the cheapest, because it is not. But people are here because there's a balance between the value that they get and the difference it makes in their life in relationship to the money or the commissions that they may say, I give up for to be here. And it's worth it to them.
Yeah.
So it's important that we recognize that whether we're an agent, a broker, a manager, an owner, that we and I were talking about this earlier, is we have to create that value so that value becomes the focal point, and the money follows the value and the success that you bring to an agent.
Oh, that's great, man. And I tell you, I really appreciate you, being on this podcast with Matt and I. I'm excited for, those within the Century 21 system to just get another look at, at what you all are doing. And you're very inspiring for myself. I'm keeping my eyes on you and I'm watching you. And I know that you and I trade conversations every once in a while, and we'll do anything to help each other out. So I appreciate that also. Anything else,
well, I appreciate
Matt?
you doing this, and I hope I'm 100% behind it. And boy,
Good.
to hear other great leaders across the country and the things that they're doing and the things that they've mastered, boy, I can't think of a better way to share ideas and elevate our own personal leadership.
Absolutely. No doubt.
Speaking of that, so I want to mention where people can connect with this. So Elevate Your Real Estate, that is on iTunes. So people can go and check that out, subscribe to the show, and get that daily 3 to 5 minute podcast.
Right.
But George, I'm also curious, maybe it's just a selfish question, but going back to where you had to develop that skill set of leadership and increase your own capacity, what were some of your favorite resources, whether they were books or seminars or anything like that? What really helped you develop that skill set?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question, Matt. I remember the moment I opened up a book, and and certainly most people would know him, but it's the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell. Mm-hmm. When I opened that book and started reading, I realized I had a long ways to go, but I also remember that there was a very important principle in that book that said leaders are not just born, they are made. And so I have a firm belief that there is nothing you cannot learn, and there's nothing that you cannot do. And so I look at that resource from the standpoint of what I read, and that being one of the great books. But then I look at the people like a Mike Ferry or other key leadership, of course, within the Century 21 system, my association and friendship with Rick Davidson and his senior leadership team, and those, the impact of who we spend our time with, I think it needs to be more deeply identified than probably people give it credit for. I cannot imagine where I would be without a Mike Ferry, without a Rick Davidson, or all the different associations of like Greg and key leadership within the Century 21 system. Without it, I would not be who I am today. Their their freeness to sharing every idea, thought, concept has been absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Growth by osmosis, definitely a key part of that. So. All right. Well, let's finish up with this. Greg Harrelson, how would you like people to connect with you?
Well, I tell you what, I'm very easy to reach. You can just connect with me at gregharrelson@gmail.com. That's the one that I give out for anyone that just wants to email me, ask me a question, and I'll do everything I can to share an answer and give you an opinion and see if I can help you out.
Cool. And then George, you want to give us just a quick rundown of where your guys' main offices are at, and if people are interested in learning more about your team and potentially joining your team, how do they go about doing that?
So on the California market, we have 12 amazing offices throughout the Ventura County area and also North LA up in Santa Clarita area. Our corporate offices are in the Simi Valley area. And then in Utah, our corporate offices are right there in Midvale, across what you call the I-15 corridor. and would love it. Also, by the way, a lot of people don't necessarily sign up for the podcast itself, like on iTunes. So often we have people who just send me a quick email, and my email is pretty simple, georgemorris@century21.com. And if you send a quick email to me, happy to sign you up for that podcast. And on Mountain Time at 7 a.m. every day, 5 days a week, that podcast, that little 3 to 5 minute call that we put out, goes out every single day during the weekdays.
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do that, and of course to be with us today. So for those of you that are watching, if you're here on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to the Level Up podcast right here. If you are listening on iTunes or Stitcher, make sure to subscribe as well. And we'll see everybody on the next episode.
Great. Hey, thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks.